socio-technical systems
Yes.
refers to an approach which is the full term is socio-technical systems design, and it's about the design of jobs, work, and organisation. And the socio-technical systems tradition is to do that in a collaborative way, yes, using action research, in naturalistic settings. So one way to do it is that you go and you interview everybody and you map the system and you map the processes and then you agree where there are good points to put in management systems, or at the end of a process, for example, or where it interacts with a different process. So it's a way of designing the organisation.
Like a map, you drew it, right?
Like a map, which brings processes together and reflects the sort of natural requirements of the job. And it does that from, as it were, the bottom up. So if you're thinking about working in a socio-technical systems design way, then you're thinking about it in terms of what comes into the organisation, what is the transformational process or processes, and what goes out of the organisation. And then from there you begin to map what the departments or the broader organisational design questions are. And you can say that successor sort of approaches to this work have been, first of all, people applying this in an expert way, going in and saying, I can help you design this, I'm the expert and I will help you design this. Or people doing it in using what they call business process re-engineering or a lean systems approach. Now, there are definite differences between lean methodology and STS approach in philosophy. Certainly in terms of the redundancy of parts. STS, for example, argues very firmly that what you want is an overlap, so you need redundancy of parts. That is, people within the system who can do more than one function, whereas lean would tend to remove that layer of overlap so that roles are more clearly differentiated, but you don't get the overlap, so you don't get the possibility that if there's something goes wrong, that somebody can make that good. It's mostly being done in a naturalistic setting, and the exceptions to that are would be where you have a new plant coming in, and so you have the staff who are about to go into a new plant, and perhaps they meet together as a group and plan things together, which is a little bit what we did on the ships, because they getting all the information from all the people, the ships at different levels, you got them, out of that came a design which was a physical design as well as a...
And the ship was driving while you were working on the ship?
No, yes, sometimes I didn't travel on voyages, because at that time there were no women who travelled on the voyages. So I would meet them in port. But out of the work we did, meeting ships in port or some people travelling, came this design for a new ship which wouldn't have separate officers and ratings, messes, would not have so much separation between the deck officers and the engineers, for example. And you asked me how it fits into group relations.
Yes.
So you can see in the design of a group relations conference how thinking of an organisation as a socio-technical system has informed the design, but it's not in itself a collaborative redesign. It's not adopting that approach. You can also see, because you're very experienced in this, that it would really help on occasions if you're doing the STS design or redesign, that you have an understanding of system psychodynamics, but it's not essential, really. And lots of people do systems redesign, whatever approach they use, without an understanding of system psychodynamics.
You are working as an organizational consultant as well, right? With
I work as
Tavistock?
an organisational consultant.
Primarily, would you say this is your daily job, something like this, at Tavi?
I only have one job,
Mm-hmm.
which is with the Tavistock Institute, and I've worked there a long time.
When did you start?
1976 I started. Yes.
76.
Yes. So this is a long time. I tried to make a break at one point when I had children, but I preferred not to be a sole trader. More money, but less interesting stimulation and so on. And in the past years, 2005 to about 2010, we did quite a lot of work with local government and their partners, which involved myself and Camilla Child with our previous director, Phil Swan, who had a lot of connections in local government. And that was about redesigning their deliberative processes to align them, to help them deliver their primary task. So the notion of primary task there was again very important. And the notion of, we were working more at the organisational level, but we were trying to align the organisation to the business processes which had been the design that was inherent in delivery of services.
So on the primary task of the organization you work.
Yes.
So how do you start? By interviews with management?
Usually you'd start with interviews, and yes, what you do is you have a horizontal and vertical cross-section of interviews. Never neglect the porters. Never neglect the porters.
At the reception.
There used to be the head porter at the Tavistock Centre. Used to be a man called, we referred to as Lofty, a tall man. And he used to give what he called car park therapy. He'd say, I'm going to give them a bit of car park therapy.
Car park.
Yeah, but he had quite a strong view of what it was like, the people who went in and out of the organisation. Usually you want, in your cross-sectional interviews, you want to interview people who are in the different departments.
Different departments of the sections.
Now, supposing you're engaged by a single department rather than the whole thing, in that case you would want to interview people in the departments who interact with your department as well as within it. If you're doing a whole systems redesign, then you'll want to interview people outside it as well. And
outside the department.
Outside the department, but also if it's a whole system, outside the system.
So
beyond the system boundary.
Suppliers.
Customers, suppliers.
Other stakeholders.
Other sorts of stakeholders, yes. And then you want a vertical cross-section too. You want to know you want to know how people see it at different points in the hierarchy. Because that can be very important. And then if you can get people to sit and collaborate with you in designing it, that's optimal. That's the optimal situation. That at each point you have some people, and you would normally have a steering group in the middle of this of
from different departments and hierarchies in a way?
Well, I tend to think about it pragmatically as being the levers of change, the political levers of change. If you don't have them in the room, you're dead in the water. So you need to know
dead in the
who
water,
these
you
are.
said. Sounds good.
Yeah. You need to know who these people are, because sometimes people's personal power and authority can also make them very important. It might be a foreman or a middle manager who holds a lot of authority. Maybe they've been there for quite a long time. Of course, you want somebody from senior management, you want presence. And from time to time, the CEO, at least symbolically, at maybe the beginning and the end. But, you know, the other thing about it is that once you've started a process like this, sometimes you're only catalytic to a process. And, you know, you set something off, you do something in a small department,
but it goes on then, and you
but it takes
catalyze
off,
the process start. It has a life of itself.
Yeah.
What do you do when you have to interviews to collect data? You write down the results?
Yes, you write down.
And what do you do? Do you...
Then you analyse them together.
Together with the client?
No, to begin with, amongst yourselves.
Okay.
Second, you write a working note. My practice goes like this. You'd have a team doing the interviews. You would all produce a field note of your...
Field note, okay.
Yes, and the field note would have in it
observations.
What the person said, what you observed, what you felt you took into the setting, your preconceptions perhaps, or your predisposition to look for something and not others.
And your counter-transference, your feelings?
Your counter-transference, definitely, your feelings. And that's it, your feelings as they evolve through the interaction and as you export them across the system. And so that your colleague can all see those things. And out of that, well, what I do, if I'm running a project, is I begin to draft a working note. Now, the working note, we have a very nice piece that Eric wrote about the working note. The working note is a preliminary kind of testing, hypothesis testing piece, which does go. So you have the working note would go to the client group, the sort of steering group, would go to them in the first instance, and you do that at diagnosis too. In any organisational setting, I would say, if you're doing an OD setting, that is as core Tavistock Institute kind of practice to use the working note.
Is it a text or what is it?
It's usually a text which captures some of the data so far, indicates its completeness or its,
I see. Is it written like an article, something like this, or more like a presentation?
I could show you some.
Yes.
I could show you some. Eric had a very...
Eric Miller?
Eric Miller had a very nice discursive style in doing that. So he would draw, his style would be discursive, and he would draw in, we've discovered this, there's this sort of phenomenon, and this sort of phenomenon, and, it seems that there might be a problem around here. But it's couched in a way that brings in the collaborators and says, so that they can say, well, it is a little bit like that, but it's more like this, or...
So they can choose and they
so
can
that they can
follow
shape
you.
it and they can give you more data. And they say, yes, I see you might get this impression from talking to those people. It makes me think, we didn't tell you that you should talk to these people over here, who also would give you a different perspective on that. And so then together you can map out where you're going with the work and what avenues might be worth exploring further, or beginning to take action around, to explore in a more action-oriented way.
So is it a verbal presentation you are talking about? You don't show slides also?
Well, you can do it. You can do it in text, which was
Okay.
Eric's way, and I worked with him in some consultancies, and I learned to do it his way. Other people do a working note in a very different way. They do it in a way which is called data display.
Data display.
So they might, for example, have themes here. So it might look like a
table?
It might look like a table, yes.
Themes and then the commands or the observations?
Themes, yes, something that exemplifies theme 1, theme 2, theme 3 and theme 4. And then it would begin to, in the discursive style, it would begin to make sense of the relationships between these factors. Yes, or themes or factors or areas of interest. But here you might do it, not everybody wants to have a lot of, especially if you're working across language barriers, you don't want to have so much text. Also, not everybody is so open to text, So you might
give it to them, right? Also,
yes,
you deliver the working.
You have a choice as to whether you deliver it in advance of a meeting, or whether or not you're there.
And you are there. You can explain.
One thing is, one good way to do it, I think, is to first, before you bring it to a meeting, is to discuss it with whoever is your
colleague
internal.
In your institute, your team.
Well, definitely definitely within your team. You must be, before. But then with your internal collaborator, your internal champion, to do that face to face. And
like testing or the checking.
Yes, and they can say checking, and they can say, oh no, it's
not like this.
Or please don't use that word. That word, they can't hear this word.
I see. He or she prepares you for the last.
So yes, a little bit more. If you have a good internal person, sometimes you think, actually, the levers of change in this organisation suggest to me that I'm not going to do that, because they will block me from doing that, and then I won't be able to lever the support from the other parts of the system. So you make a judgment about that. But you can see how it could be very helpful to have gone through that process ahead of time.
Francis, can you say a few words about your professional development? When did you start it? You have been to Cambridge, as I know. Studied
I did. I studied history in what we call the history tripos, which is parts 1 and part 2. It's a joke. I mean, that's just historical legacy in this language. But most of it was the history of political thought. And I came from a very political background myself, personally, and I went to New York, and I worked for a political consultant in New York for a while, and then I came back to the UK, and I muddled about, not knowing quite what to do, and then I saw this job at the Tavistock Institute.
In the newspaper? Or
in the newspaper, I saw it, and it said I would be working with unions and management and staff within the company. And I liked that.
It fitted to your background
It fitted to my background, but it also fitted to the fact that after being quite politically active, for my, through my teens, you can say, and very politically conscious through my life, I got to a point where I found I was just encountering people like me who thought the same way, and I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't think it was pointless to me to talk to people who already thought the same way that I did. I thought, no, that's not how I want to be political or how I want to take my values forward. So I liked the idea of working with different parts of the system. And I liked, it might have said something about heavy industry. It's probably not an accident that, that was my father's background as well. So, you know, that I had an interest. It appealed to me, this job title. And I went for the interview, and I didn't hear for 2 months. But I didn't apply for any other jobs because I knew that was my job. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, I was confident. I just
You
waited.
drew it to...
Yes, I just waited for that one, and I left at one point and tried to do some other things. But in fact, I went back because I knew that was my job, and it was through those activities and experiences that I began to understand the socio-psychological traditions within the institute better, and the contribution that they could make, if you see what I mean, and began to develop that. In late '87 was my first group relations conference, and then a month later I joined, 1988, through the winter, a 10-week study group, small study group, with Evelyn Cleveley.
For 10 weeks, so every week one small study group?
Yes, the same group.
For 1.5 hours or so each session?
Yeah. I can't remember.
Non-residential, so to say. Yeah.
No, it wasn't residential. They were weekly, on a weeknight, in the Tavistock Centre, and
after work in the nights.
After work. Yeah, for 1.5, 2 hours. I can't remember. But anyway, we met for 10 weeks, which is, I find that very interesting. And after that, I began to, to adopt that practice more and more, introduce that into the way I worked, and work with it more.
And thank you for joining our staff here in Germany for the Group Relations Conference.
Well, it's been a great pleasure, and of course a great challenge to me to be working across the boundary of language in particular. Yeah.
It's perfect. Thank you very much, Francis.
You're welcome.